LJ?
Yeah?
I really want to see the new recap review. Where can I go?
Well, I'll tell you, little Johnny. If you head on over to vessel.com/the TTV channel, you'll find all of our content, recap reviews, mock spotlights, and more, on Vessel a week early. That's right, a full 7 days before we release it on YouTube. Not only that, but content from tons of other creators all across the internet. In order to access it, you need to sign up for early access, which is only $3 a month. It's a really great deal, and it helps us create better, higher quality content that gets you guys in on the loop a whole week early.
Wow! I'm gonna go sign up right now!
You do that, little Johnny. You do that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sync. Hey everybody, I'm Kahi.
I'm Meso.
Okay. I'm Barterin.
You did it again. Welcome to TTV Talks.
Listen, this hierarchy makes no sense. I should go first.
No, it really
is just habit, dude.
Yeah.
That's how we've always done it on TTV Talks, but it is inaccurate.
Not really.
Go back and listen.
Probably. I don't think I'm ever usually on many TTV Talks with you.
I mean, TTV Talks, it's
True.
always, the hierarchy goes in order of, like, person who came here first down the line. That's how the hierarchy goes. Var was here first, because Var started the freaking company. So
I'm not saying you're not wrong. I'm just saying it's not what precedent has.
Stop taking my shtick.
It's like, well,
it's a nice shtick. It belongs to me.
The last time this happened, you took, like, we argued about it on Brickfeed. Remember that? Like,
we did argue about that on Brickfeed. That was a thing that happened, like, not too long ago.
It was pretty funny.
Brickfeed sucks.
Anyhow.
Worst podcast ever. Don't watch it.
Brickfeed is
Speaking of watching things, you should check out vessel.com.
Totally
it also
go watch
sucks, but you should go there anyway and give us money because we're greedy and we like money.
Speaking of stuff that sucks, I can't find a better segue, so let's do a sucky segue.
I mean,
what we're gonna talk
we
about.
suck. We're a crappy, greedy company, just like all the other crappy,
We're
greedy
a crappy
companies.
greedy company just wanting money.
Like that Rooster
Just
Teeth
like
company,
Rooster
am I right?
Oh boy.
Come on, man. You couldn't think of a
so I'm
segue?
gonna-
I basically set that up for you. That was pretty
Thank
easy
you.
to go from.
No, thank you, Var. That was really good. I'm gonna preface this by saying what happened a week ago.
Yeah,
I was
I think
asleep,
we wanna run
I
that.
don't even know. What are you talking about?
Oh yes, tell
Sound
the story.
Tell me the story,
Sound
Connie.
asleep.
Read me a
All right.
bedtime story. I'm tired.
Okay, I'm gonna read you a bedtime story.
curled up
Speaking
in
of
my bed.
bedtime stories, I was actually in bed, asleep, sound asleep. It's 2:00 in the morning. I've been asleep.
We already
for a while.
went over this in the podcast.
No, tell it again. People may not know. Just go for it. You were sound asleep and blank.
Sound asleep. Meso calls me on my phone. I'm like, what's going on? So I answer the phone. I said, hello? And Meso goes, Kahi, this is important. You need to get on Discord and talk to us right now. And I'm like, what's going on? So I get up, I go on Discord. And then I was like, what's happening? And Meso goes, have you read the Shane letter? And
This
in my
is
head,
way
I'm like,
funnier when we told it on the podcast.
okay, well, alright, fine. I didn't know you stole the story on the podcast. I don't know how you can tell it that's more funny than this. I'm telling it
Because I was the one
as
who
a
told the story.
perspective of an annoyed person, because I was so annoyed.
I'm sorry, Kai. It was very disrespectful. But listen, you are the Rooster Teeth guy. I wanted
Those
your
big
input.
corporate
I
companies
needed
don't
it.
respect their employees, man. They don't let them sleep. They don't let them
I
have their
know,
artistic
exactly.
integrity.
Mistreating. I could write a whole letter about, like, how you guys.
and write a
They're
whole
mistreating me.
37-page letter about how
Right,
you were woken
37
up late at
pages about,
night.
like,
It was like
Right.
it'd been going on all day, and I'd see it making the rounds in the community, and I had a thought on it at the time. I had my own opinions, but I wanted to hear your thoughts. So like, I didn't care you were asleep. I got on, and I was like, I need to hear Kai's thoughts on this, just because I figured you had read it.
That is the most
It's not-
self-centered thing I've ever heard you
It's
say.
like, not only that, like, the thing isn't so much that you got on and you want to hear my opinion on something, and beyond the fact that it's super late at night, the fact that I was on and you were not on because you're off doing some other thing.
Yeah,
you were just kind of like, you're doing some other thing, and then I left, and then you're like, oh, Kahi isn't here. Well, I've been
That's
waiting
a
all day
great
to tell
point.
this.
It's like there was
Yes.
plenty of time where you could have hopped to the call while Kai was actually
Right.
on.
Well, no,
true.
you knew I was in the call too.
I,
Aldo was there, and he was like, we were just talking about stuff. He's like, oh yeah, Meso and I are doing something else.
I
And I
admit
was like,
my
so
fault.
you knew I was on, and then I went to bed, and you're like, you woke me up for no reason.
I am very
Not for no
sorry.
reason.
I made a mistake. But like, I had figured you had read the stuff, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna wake him up and he's gonna be like, okay, I believe
Didn't
it,
even hear
or I
about
don't
it.
believe it. and then go back to sleep. But like, no, from your perspective, it was, I woke you up in the middle of the night to read a 37-page letter and then tell it back to me.
By the way, that letter was quite a drag to read.
I thought it was something related to the company. I thought like Shane was a lawyer from Lego who was suing us. That's what I thought. It was like he was finally coming
For
out.
those who are not aware, do you want to give a brief like synopsis of the letter, or do you want me to do it?
Okay,
I'll let you do it.
For those who are not, I'll do it. For those who are not aware of what's going on in Rooster Teeth, there's an animator by the name of Shane Newville. He was a lead animator on Ruby, the animated show Ruby. And if you've ever seen that, you know what it is.
Rooster Teeth is an online, YouTube channel, kind of like us. They do stuff like Red vs. Blue, Ruby.
Mine's
Red vs. Blue and Ruby are the big. Yeah, Red vs. Blue and Ruby are the big things.
Right. Ruby is a kind of anime-esque show. We're not going to get into that discussion if it's anime or not, but it's an anime-esque show.
It's not an anime. But I'm glad you're calling it an anime-esque show.
Yeah, it's about like, these girls who go to a school where they learn how to fight to become like hunters and huntresses. Anyhow, so Shane Newville is a lead animator of the show. Monty Ohm was a creator of the show. He was also an animator. Monty Ohm unfortunately passed away, I think, a year ago?
It was
early
last year, yeah.
Right.
I think it's been a little over a year because the second semester for me just ended, and I remember he passed away around the second semester of my first year in college. So
yeah, no, and I remember it was after I went to RTX in RTX 14, and I met him there, and I think that was the last. He was not able to make it to the next RTX, so I think that was the last RTX he was at. So basically, what had happened with that is that Shane had left. We'd known that Shane had left the company. He was on his Twitter profile. It said he was no longer with Rooster Teeth. Recently, in just the past week or so, he made this 37-page letter, which I think he posted on his Tumblr, and he spread it in other places. Twitter, yeah. And it was entitled "A Open Letter to All of Those Who Liked Monty Ohm's
Treasured Monty Ohm, yeah.
Yes. Treasured Monty Ohm. And basically, it's a manifesto on how Ruby was overtaken by the corporate people at Rooster Teeth, and how they kind of, how they took and like kind of corrupted the project that Monty really wanted to have. And
they changed aspects about it. They changed
a lot
the
of stuff.
story. They disrespected his work and the people who worked for him and his legacy and his team.
They credit his wife.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of accusations, basically,
Quite right.
And
kind of the whole you think of a greedy corporate business coming in and taking away like an artistic license or something, or like overseeing a creative project, and then like when you think about it, you think like Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3, in fact, like Sony stepping in and like ruining the movie because they want to get their greedy corporate hands all over it. It's kind of like what
they want to build a franchise.
What the letter was sort of portraying Rooster Teeth as.
Yes.
Right. And so there was a huge faction that popped up in Reddit, on Twitter, on Tumblr. This kind of thing kind of blew up because, again, it's a large letter about the corporate inner workings of Rooster Teeth, and you don't get to see that very often.
Yeah. Especially not from someone who actually worked for the company. And someone who worked so closely with Monty Ohm. Shane Newville was basically Monty's right-hand man in a lot of ways. So people, even though some people had never heard of Shane Newville, his name carried weight because when they looked into him, they saw, he was very close with Monty Ohm, and people love Monty Ohm. So
he definitely made a point to try and paint that as well in his letters, that he was super, super close to Monty Ohm and knew Monty really, really closely, that kind of thing. Obviously, this whole Lettergate, as it's been deemed, is important because Rooster Teeth is one of the largest channels on YouTube right now. I think they're probably one of the more popular ones for sure.
I would wager so.
They are, and they also now they own a lot of other channels that you might not have realized are now owned. Like they own Kinda Funny, they own Screw Attack now, they own Funhouse, they have one
Slow-Mo Guys, which is probably the more
Guys.
The most
Slow-Mo Guys is probably
well-known
the one that
asset of theirs.
Everyone has probably seen, even if they don't know that Rooster Teeth made it, they've seen it. And a lot of people that don't know Gavin Free will know him as a Slow-Mo guy. Like a lot of times I'll show people stuff he does and like, oh, isn't that the guy from the Slow-Mo Guys? You've probably seen it in your school, honestly. Your school has probably shown you a
video ever.
Well,
that's cool. Great.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
There's always outliers, everybody.
Right. Let's not trust Meso's opinion as the norm.
Oh, come on.
But basically the whole thing, like, it prompted the thing because Rooster Teeth is inspiration for a lot of what we do here because they are a production company and they do a lot of productions that you don't really see out of internet companies. Like Ruby is really unique because it's a completely creator owned, or not creator owned, but like it's a completely original work. created by someone. It's an animated show that is 3D, that is completely owned by this independent internet company. It's in its own kind of like sphere. You know, there's not a lot of other shows I can point to that are like RWBY.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so like, and we based a lot of what we do as a company off what Rooster Teeth did as a company about, 8-10 years earlier. So it was interesting to us to see what, like, this whole thing blow up behind the scenes, how the community reacted to it, and like how it applies to what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah.
And I know, like, Meso, you and I, like, we initially had very different reactions to
Yes.
this letter. So I want to have you talk about that and like kind of
But
your opinion,
you
your
wanna do
initial
it right now?
opinion and stuff.
Yeah, go
let's
for it.
go right
Okay,
now.
basically, like, I read the letter, I saw it on Twitter, and I'm like, okay, I kind of been following this for a while. I knew Shane Newville was no longer working with the company, but his departure was, like, very vague. He just posted on Twitter one day, he was like, I am no longer working at Rooster Teeth. Things did not go as planned. Best of luck to the RWBY team going forward. And
Yeah, I remember the day when he left too, because I remember everybody posting that Twitter link about how he said he had left. We all thought he quit.
It was crazy because
Yeah, right.
Shane is not a personality of Rooster Teeth. People do not know him that well, but the RWBY team, people had been monitoring the progress of Volume 3 closely because obviously Monty Oum passed away and he was obviously the guy. He was renowned for his animation. He was fantastic with animation, and obviously they were bringing a lot of new people onto the team as the production of the show increased. Shane was one of the original crew. Then there were new people like Dylan Gu, who was a YouTuber that they recruited to join the team, and several other people, but Shane was, I think, the lead animator, honestly speaking. So people were, like, skeptical all through the season. Is it going to be well animated? Are the fight scenes going to look good? And naturally, when Shane Newville left, people were like, oh no, I'm not sure which scenes he worked on, but now another animator is no longer working with the company. But then the finale came and went, the series ended, and people kind of moved on, and then this letter came along. Saw it on Twitter one day, and I'm like, oh, this dude is basically saying a lot of stuff in the letter, namely that obviously we had already kind of covered it. Monty's wife, Sheena Ohm, was apparently a large part of RWBY production behind the scenes. She had been brainstorming a lot of ideas with Monty, a lot of character concepts, a lot of story points, and apparently Rooster Teeth wanted nothing to do with her. They refused to allow her to be the part of the project. They took away a role of hers, who she was going to voice in the show, and a character concept which was modeled around her. They radically altered. Then they changed the animation program that they used to actually create the show, changed story points, forced a different workflow, scrapped a lot of Monty's old animation work and story plans for the show going forward, and were pretty disrespectful, supposedly, to Shane Newville. And all this stuff, my first inclination was, oh, this dude, I guess my first thought was not that he was lying, basically. That wasn't my first inclination. It was that, oh, this guy, there's probably some truth to this. Wow, this is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a culture shock.
It is. I've heard nothing but good things about the RWBY team up to this point. Everybody loves Rooster Teeth, and the RWBY team specifically, even if you're not a fan of the direction of the show, or the plot, or like anything in particular, they seem like, to us on the outside looking in, they seem like good people. They seem like they enjoy what they're doing. They have this kind of like almost a family kind of feeling to them. Like they do what they do because they love doing it, and they also want to honor Monty Oum and carry the torch for him after he died. And that was a big point in Shane's letter. It was like, they don't want to carry the torch. They destroyed the old torch and then made a new one that they're passing off as the old torch. He used that exact analogy. Basically.
Right.
Almost word for word, and it was quite shocking. So my first reaction was, this is true. All these claims are true, and I don't know where we're going to going forward.
Yeah, I remember you posting in the chat, like, oh, wow, now I've got no clue whether all the things that I hate about RWBY are... Was that because of, like, Monty's direction, or is that because of the the interference from Rooster Teeth?
Because I love RWBY, but as we mentioned in the TTV Talks about RWBY, it's not a perfect show. There are a lot of elements to it which I find questionable, a lot of the plot decisions specifically, and he mentioned specifically in this, no matter what you think of the letter, there are certain things in it that would be pretty hard. It would be an outright lie if it was true, basically. There's no grain of truth, like certain fight scenes, story elements, character stuff completely eradicated from the volume. And none of it's particularly, it is all still there in some shape or form, basically. It's not like they just chopped out stuff, but it does call into question a lot of things.
Yeah,
that we'll probably
especially the timeline of when this has been released too, because Shane just picked like the greatest time to release this with all the controversies going around with YouTubers right now, like Vine Brothers, Tobuscus, all this kind of stuff, where it seems like YouTubers are coming out of the woodwork to get in trouble. It's just like another one to add to the list of YouTubers doing scummy things behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was just shocking when I read it. I was like, I cannot believe this. So that was my initial gut reaction.
Right.
Yeah, so, me and Kahi read it.
That was also
we had very similar reactions to
it. me and Var read. Okay, well, first also Meso beforehand he had posted about it, and another member of the company also I guess I won't name names.
It was pretty funny. Like after like I saw everybody's comments like from our group about the letter before I read it, everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, this is awful! Oh my gosh, Rooster Teeth is terrible!" And like, if you guys do this to me, I'm quitting, that kind of thing or whatever. You know, like those kind of comments.
Right.
And then I go and read the article, and I'm like,
me and Bar.
To be fair, I wasn't that extreme about it. I was like,
okay, you're right. You were not as extreme as some other people who made the certain comments. Me and Var, we were like, all right, this guy's full of it.
Yeah, the guy is full of crap.
This guy is full of it. Here's the thing, the guy's full of crap. Shane, like, you read this letter, not even by, like, actually other sources or whatever, like, disregard other sources, other points of view. Just by reading the letter himself, you already can tell that this guy is very unstable, very, very hard to work with. I can, like, all the stuff that he talks about certain things in a negative light. Like, they're actual, like, sins against the core of Ruby. And reading them, like, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know why he's
the thing that gets me about the letter.
This is, it's like...
Yeah, because, like, the thing about that is, like, it's so evident. Like, he does not do a good job of painting himself as a person to trust either, because he starts the whole letter off about how he's got depression, how he's had it his whole life, how it's been hard to deal with, and how it's affected his life in a negative aspect, how he can't retain his marriage, how he's had, like, struggling with his marriage and struggling to keep relationships going in his jobs.
Yep. Right, and
his wife
I get just to, like, create sympathy for him, but it's like, it's a thing where it's like, okay, well, you're obviously going through a lot just from the get-go. It's like, and obviously, I mean, like, not to knock against anyone who has, you know, who suffers from depression or anything, but a lot of times when someone starts out their story, accusation against, especially against a previous employer, when they start out by saying, I've been diagnosed with depression since a very early age, you know, it's like, it's more like a thing to gain sympathy, to be like, in case I do anything wrong, here's the reason why I have depression, so, you know,
it does feel kind of like it's sort of a thing he threw it, because I don't see, the thing is, this is a letter about Monty Oom. He titles it for all those who like treasured Monty Oom, right? So it was weird to me that like the first 4 pages basically were nothing to do with Monty Oom at all. They were basically a show reel. Him. They were like going over all this dude's problems, his life, whatever. I don't understand why any of that was relevant at all, but he brought it up anyway. He brought up his wife, he brought up all that, and then he started going over how he met Monty, and then and put links to all his work that he's worked on.
That's the thing
his
that got
show
me too.
reel,
Like,
as though like this is some kind of
like,
application.
Like, this is all about Monty. Is everything here is about Monty. Monty showed me how to make this cool thing. By the way, I think it's really cool. You should check it out if you want to hire me. Here's a link, just in case you're kind of looking for an animator. Anyhow, so you showed me this, you know, it's like, that's what it feels like for the first couple
it's just weird. Because I was waiting for, because like obviously going into the letter, I knew that there was something negative about Rooster Teeth because everybody was reacting to it in the chat. So I was expecting to read the letter and hear all the allegations from the get-go, but it's like, he starts off like the first half of it and it's nothing to do with Monty Oom or Rooster Teeth. And it's just, it was a grind to get through. It's like, I did not need to read this guy's life story.
Yeah.
So it feels really centered around him. And it's kind of odd because he's trying to make it this whole point that it's, you know, it's all about Monty and Monty's legacy, but it's like, it's so focused on him. And that's kind of what I got throughout the entire letter too, even the allegations and everything. Because a big thing that he's trying to paint Rooster Teeth as is like the greedy corporate company coming in and taking away Monty's legacy. And that's, the narrative sort of works, but then he does this thing where he tries to paint himself as like the Messiah, like Monty's Messiah, his legacy reincarnated.
It rests,
you know, it's
on
like
him to continue and carry the torch. It is his responsibility.
He makes it seem like he is the only one who ever sat down with Monty and was able to like pick apart Monty's brain or whatever and like figure out exactly what he wanted to do with the show, and that he's the only one who has the right to say what direction the show takes and what programs the show takes. It was ridiculous, honestly, reading it.
And I wrote in the chat, it's like he was trying to accuse everyone of trying to stop the one true animator from carrying his sensei's work, into the sunset. That's what it feels like. It's written like that. And the thing about this is that, like, again, he'll in this letter, and I think we link to it in the description, Meso, if you can make sure we do that. You read this and you can definitely see where, like, stuff that makes a lot of sense is painted as something that's extremely negative. For instance, one of the things that he paints as being extremely negative is that he has to sync with the staff drive. Like, he has to upload his files to this, the server, and he's talking about how much more inefficient it is because everything's way slower and everything because of that. Which I don't deny is true, but if you're working in an animation team, the whole team needs to have the models, the stuff you're working on, the scenes you're working on, your workflow. It's all part of this animation workflow. Right. It's like, as people we have our own workflow for our videos. Obviously, it's not as involved as Rooster Teeth is, but it's like we have our own staff drive, all that. Imagine, for example, if like one of us was like, well, I'm just not syncing my audio. I'm just gonna like, I'm gonna do things my own way. I'm gonna edit my own stuff. It's such a headache to deal with. And he paints it as like, oh, the corporate is trying to force me to do something. It's like, no, that's part of your job. You work with a team. You're not the only animator. That kind of thing.
Especially as the show continues in scope and scale and continues like growing. The smaller the team, maybe you could get away with stuff like that, but as you grow larger, you have to keep things organized. You have to keep things like segmented off and like divided between responsibilities. You can't have people take over a huge chunk all by themselves. You know what I mean? It's like you gotta work as one unit, but there's a ton of moving parts.
Yeah. And part of it was too, but like Monty had developed a lot of the early animation stuff. He worked in Poser, which is a different type of animation tool. It's a type of animation tool that allows him to work really quickly, really efficiently. He's able to copy poses and apply them to different models. So the way that works is basically like you have like the Ruby model and you have like a Yang model. These are two characters in the show. And then you can have him do one animation and have it apply to either of them because of how that program works. It's great for speeding things up, doing fight choreography and doing that kind of thing. But it has its own flaws and limitations. Part of it is that like a lot of people that came in did not know how to use Poser and they are trying to transition into Maya. And in the letter, Shane paints that as like this horrific thing. They're trying to bulldoze Monty's work, trying to take everything.
Right.
And it is true that like some of the work that Monty did was no longer able to be completed because they're now using Maya instead of Poser. That's not incorrect. It's just not like that's a very reasonable thing to do.
Right.
I understand
because that's
that.
the standard. The thing with like Poser was a consumer level program. It's not meant to be used for large productions like what they need for Ruby. Maya, on the other hand, is standard. It's like the standardized program for 3D like modeling, animating, that kind of thing. It's like all the people that they've hired, all the professional people that they've brought onto the team already know how to use that program. So if we want an efficient team doing things all together and making something, good and professional, why not use the program that everybody knows already? That is a completely logical step to take, but he tries to paint this as like it's this big thing, like they're trying to take away the programs Monty used and the legacy Monty had. It's like, okay, calm down, dude. It's like, it is a completely rational thing.
And so, like, Monty was one of a kind. His workflow was one of a kind. And it had to be understood that like Shane was trained by Monty in a lot of things. But Monty can't train every animator that comes to work for Rooster Teeth. He can't train them how to do, like, Shane did not, I don't believe, he learns a lot of the animation stuff from Monty. I don't know if he goes to school for it. I don't think. Right? He just he goes back and forth and just exchanges emails with him.
See, I do want to touch upon that a little bit in a sec. I'll let you finish though. But yeah, I don't think he went to school on that either.
Right. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing to learn from. It's just like, you have to realize that when you're working, you want to scale up your production, you want to scale up everything you're working on, you have to work with a team. And it feels like Shane is not a team player. He wants to do things his way, and it's the only way. Okay, and he kind of like assumed that he was going to take over. Like, as soon as Monty kind of passed away, he kind of assumed that, okay, I am now Monty. The show is now kind of mine. I will supervise everything. I have creative say over everything.
Yeah.
And
whether that was done out of a desire to seize, like, power and glory, or honestly to continue his friend's work, nobody's ever really going to know for certain. But that is the error that does come across in the letter.
Yeah, see,
by
the
his own
thing
words.
about the letter is I think Shane is being genuine in his words. I think he believes what he's saying, and I think he's not lying about anything. I think everything he said is true. It's just
From
his
his
perspective of things. It looks like this bad, evil thing, but really that's not how it is. And through his own perspective, he's kind of portraying it like it's a bad thing too. So when you read the letter and you read his look on things, it's easy to see that and be like, okay, well, yeah, the Rooster Teeth guys are evil people, but that's just through the words that he's spewing, which, like I said, not lies. It's just the perspective he's coming from. But the thing that I dislike about Shane a lot, and I think it's really evident in this letter, is that he's clearly got a case of special snowflake syndrome here, where it's like he has no clue. I don't know what's going on through this guy's head, but like, as far as I know, Shane is only just an animator, right? He never had any kind of supervisor role. He was never a producer. He was never a team leader. He was
a lead animator. That goes back and forth. Like I hear from several people that he was the lead animator, but on his resume, like on LinkedIn, I think, and some other things, I don't believe he has that title.
Right.
I
haven't seen anyone from Rooster Teeth say he was a lead animator, and I haven't seen that in any official capacity. I've heard
he might be, and we just haven't seen it. But as far as I know, he isn't. And I might just have
as far as I know, he isn't
I've
either.
seen it on wiki pages, some of them, and some of them he's not. He's just a normal animator. And some of them he's just close with Monty, so they assume he's a lead animator and stuff.
Right.
It's kind of
I think
iffy.
a lot of it is that, he was close to Monty, and therefore he's assumed to be a lead animator. The thing with me is that I don't believe, because he kind of he has like a timeline of when he was hired by Rooster Teeth and everything and how that worked out. He was only hired by Rooster Teeth like a year before Ruby's production, right? I believe. So I think so.
Didn't he work on RVB season?
He might have.
Yeah, I think he helped Monty with a few RVB stuff. I'm not sure.
Maybe season 10.
I think Shane Newville. This could be a hilariously wrong statement. Forgive me for if I'm like wrong. I think Shane Newville was the one who animated RVB season 10 because I know did Monty do that or not?
Monty did do season 9 and season 10.
Oh, okay.
8, 9, and
I don't know. Well, I'll do some research. I'll amend or put an annotation or whatever.
No, I'm trying to remember.
Because at the most, he was a lead animator. At what I believe is he was just an animator. But I haven't seen any proof to say that he was actually a lead animator or not. So I don't know. The thing that gets me about Shane in the letter though is that it's so apparent that he's got such a terrible work ethic when it comes to working as a team player. That it's incredible that he feels so entitled towards certain things. Like
it's incredible
like
that he
how he's
lasted
painting
as long as he did in that environment with that attitude.
I
would
have fired him.
Yeah.
With everything he said, I would have fired him too. Because it's like I don't know what he tries to paint it as though he's got some kind of like big say, like overarching say over like the way the show is handled. Like with Sheena, he wanted Sheena to voice act Winter. Because that's what Monty wanted. Winter was initially based off of Sheena's character personality.
Allegedly, yeah.
I mean, it sounds right to me. But
right, I don't see any reason why he would lie about that. It's just kind of like he's the only source we've ever heard from that.
Yeah, so. But so there was a thing about how he wanted Sheena to voice act Winter after Monty died because like she's based off her. So cool. Then he goes to Rooster Teeth and he's like, hey, let's make Sheena voice act Winter. And they're all like, I mean, we've got some professional voice actors we could bring in to actually do the role, because we're making a show here. And it would be better to have real professional voice actors voice act in the show that we want to produce because we take it seriously, right? Seems like a completely reasonable thing to think. But Shane is all like, no, we got to get Sheena on this because it was part of Monty's legacy, his dream. And Rooster Teeth is like, okay, we'll put Sheena up there. We'll let her audition for the role. And whoever is better, whoever does the best job whoever does the best job gets the part, right?
That's the thing that gets me too. It's like he presents a situation and he says the CEO, which is Matt. I don't know. He's tried to like not use names in it. But I don't know why, because anyone who knows Rooster Teeth knows who's in that role. Matt Hollum says, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have all these people voice voice act and audition for the role, including Sheena, and then we'll sit and decide who best fits the role, and whoever best fits the role will get it. The best voice will win.
Makes that sound like they just slapped Sheena in the face and tossed her out into the garbage or something. Like,
but in reality, that's a fair compromise. That is
a very fair compromise. She's not a professional voice actor. They didn't know she was involved at all. She wasn't involved at all in any official capacity.
Yes.
So, and like, the thing too is that like Sheena, I'm not going to, obviously she was obviously very close to Monty, being his wife, and obviously she knew about what he was doing, but the way he paints it is that like Monty, Sheena, and Shane are the only people who actually know what the true Ruby is.
He says that pretty
Sheena
much. He says that almost in those exact words. Because there was many gaps in the story and a lack of understanding of the Ruby universe amongst those in production. There were many characters that only she and Monty and certain close friends, which means him, or other people knew the exact purpose of. And he basically insinuates that unless she is a part of production, the team will never have the full picture of the universe. And this is tricky, because a lot of the stuff he says, like the stuff about their treatment of Sheena going like, she will never be a part of Ruby, she is not a part of Ruby in any way, that was the kind of stuff that initially made me go like, whoa, that's pretty disrespectful if true. And by that same token, nobody knows who Sheena Ohm is.
Well, yeah,
few people have
literally
heard of her.
no one knew who she was. A lot of people, even Monty's family, didn't know who she was until he passed away.
Monty's brother made a post where he was like, I didn't know Monty was married until I went to the wake. Which means that like Monty, I mean, obviously, guy wants to keep his life private.
Yeah.
That's, it's great.
But it also means
more
that
power
few
to him.
people actually know the full story here. And
Right.
the only person who's saying these things is Shane Newville. So you kind of have to take it at face value or not. And that's tricky to do, all things considered.
And it's also weird because I followed almost every single interview and like panel and everything they did about Ruby before it came out. And Monty was very, very vocal about Carrie and Miles being very involved in the initial pitch of Ruby.
Yeah.
And like going back and forth. And Miles writes a lot of Ruby. Carrie writes a lot of movie. Carrie directs. I think, is he a director or producer?
I think he's director.
He's a head of production. Yeah. He's very high up on that level with Ruby. And these guys have contributed a lot to the development of the show. So it's odd to me that like Shane has this different narrative that Monty himself has confirmed in so many panels that like Miles and Carrie are like, the writers on the show. He's working with them to make sure the show happens. And it's odd that like Shane's like, well, he didn't tell him everything.
Yeah.
His wife knows everything and I know everything and we're the only two people that matter. And Rooster Teeth has tossed us out on the curb. And it seems odd that he wouldn't at least acknowledge something that Monty himself has acknowledged. Now, was it in public? Was it just for, we
who
know
can say? And that's the problem.
But the thing too, though, is that like I know from my own personal experience, like working on different creative projects, different comics, different kind of things. When you work in a group, especially for a production of a show, there's a lot of ideas that get tossed that are like combinations of different suggestions by different people. That like I mean,
we brainstorming. It's just
when we're like we work together and stuff, and like when we brainstorm, there's so many things like characters and concept and stuff that are like a mismatch of all of our ideas kind of put together. And sometimes I'll say something and then Var will be like, wait a second, what if we did something like that? And he comes up with something different and it's based off something I said and something different. Or I'll do the other thing, or like, I'll come up with a character and then Var will come up with a design and then, someone else, Purple, will draw something and then I'll have an idea based on what that is, and the voice actor will come in and the voice actor will give me an idea of how to write the character, and I write the character, writes it differently.
Okay.
And it's like,
all right. We get it. We get it.
Insane, you spoke so much.
Slow down.
It's basically the whole deal is I don't think that the way Shane is portraying the situation is the entirety of the situation. And
that's really the core
I
of the
feel
matter.
like, honestly, he's a really bad employee.
Yeah, I mean, and the important thing about it too is that like he kind of props Monty up on this pedestal here, but like the truth of the fact of the matter is that Monty can have a bad idea. Not every idea Monty's going to come up with is going to be gold or it's going to work for the show. And at the end of the day, the IP does belong to Rooster Teeth. So when they're trying to make a show and they want to make it work, sometimes you have to drop ideas or change things. And that's just how it works. That's part of show business.
Yeah.
So it's weird that he tries to paint it as though they're trying to ruin his legacy. But going back on the whole Shane is just a bad employee. Yeah, he absolutely is. And like what I was saying earlier about like how it's like, I don't know like what his role actually was. Cause for all I know, everything I've seen, he was just an animator. So it's weird that he tried to step in and like make Sheena the voice actor. It's weird that he talked to Matt about hiring one of the fan animators who did like that tribute video to Monty, and Matt was like, "Okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that." And they actually reached out to the guy and hired him. But then Shane is like, "Well, it was kind of weird that they hired this guy and they didn't talk to me about it first." It's like, who are you?
Yeah.
Why would they need to talk to you about it?
Yeah, is that weird that they didn't talk to you about it? Like you suggested this guy, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool," and then they went out and hired him. And so, like, why are you kind of like, well, they should have consulted me before hiring him,
right?
Why
who are you? Like, when did you become a freaking producer of the show? When did you become an employer of Rooster Teeth? When did this happen?
But the thing that gets me at the very end, he gets mad because before they finally let him go because he's assigned to this scene. He's a month to work on it. And because they have a new workflow and he's like, well, it's really hard to work with. For 3 weeks, he doesn't get it done. And finally, the last week, he decides to do it his way, which is presumably using Poser or presumably using whatever workflow he decides to do. And whatever his way is, works really well. He's able to get it in a week. And after all that stuff, presumably because they can't work with him anymore and he's not uploading his files anymore, they fire him. And the thing that he tries to paint as a horrible thing is that someone that he trusts in the company asks for his laptop, and they take the laptop away and they back it up. And then he finds out he's fired, and he's super mad because they've taken his laptop and they backed up on the files.
Yep.
And that was the thing. It's like,
oh,
are you?
They took the work that you made for their show. And backed it up?
They took your work computer and they backed up the files? You know, the files you just said that you weren't uploading to the drive.
You mean the files that they paid you to work on?
Yeah.
Were you thinking that you could just walk out of the company with all that work that you did? You realize that work was theirs, not yours.
Right, they paid you to do that.
They paid you.
You realize that was a thing. You realize, like, they were concerned because you are an unstable person and kind of a bad worker and not a team player, that the moment you were fired, you would just go and delete everything. You realize that's why they did that, right? Because you have a history of not doing that. He's like, right, is that really like...
He has a history of not seeking that drive. He admits it.
He admits it. He's like, I don't like doing it. I think it's really inefficient.
The big quote.
Wow. Big surprise then that they decided to take your...
I know, right? The big quote that I remember from this was that he himself said that he did not sign up or join Rooster Teeth to become an animator. He joined Rooster Teeth to work with Monty.
Yeah.
That was it. That's the big thing, really. That's what it all boils down to when it comes to this letter.
He specifically says, if I just wanted to be a good animator, I'd probably still be there. But I wanted to work with Monty.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Like, okay, so you're not a team player.
That's the problem. He's such a special snowflake.
It is
he
the
does not care
like
about working on the project or working with other people. He just wants to work with Monty.
It is the statements like that, and it is the statements about stuff that he got mad at, and that things so terrible that do cast doubt upon.
Right, that's why those are the things why I can't take the letter seriously. Because like I said earlier, I'm sure he believes everything he's saying. I don't think he's lying. I think everything he said is very much the truth. I just think that his perspective on it is so out of whack, it's hard to take him seriously.
Right.
It's like,
exactly
everything he tries to paint as this bad thing seems like a completely logical thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like if you read like a Nazi textbook, like, about World War II, and it's like, no, it's coming from the point of view, like, all the events that they report on that happened. But it's just from a different point of view, that's made to look like, victories that we would write in history because, most people view the Nazis as being bad. All the stuff that we write about as being evil, they would write about as being like
Mein Kampf.
Right. Yeah, basically.
It's like this big, emotional struggle Hitler story, but really it's like,
the ramblings of a madman.
I mean, obviously, it's not the same. Obviously, it's not like...
Yeah, obviously, that's a pretty drastic comparison.
Extreme example. I'm just saying that's like, it's a different point of view, but on the same things of the same facts that happened in history. And I believe if Rooster Teeth were to come out and say, like, well, this is the reason we did this, this is the reason we did this, all the complaints in this letter would be addressed.
Yeah.
I remember this happened once on Reddit. Like, an employer of Reddit went on AMA and he was like, oh, I used to work for Reddit and they fired me because of this. And the CEO came on the AMA and he's like, actually, we fired you because of all these reasons. And he goes through, like, all these points one by one. He's like, yeah.
It's definitely a strange thing. And I think I think an important thing about the letter too is that people kind of backed up the claim. Other employees of Rooster
Yes,
Teeth
that
sort of
is
backed
important
it up.
to note.
Okay, that is important to note.
Dylan Gu,
Yeah,
the
that was. I think
animator,
that was the
was-
thing that really convinced some of our employees here at Pandemic.
That's definitely what put more credibility to me, because the way I found out about it, I do not follow Shane Newville on Twitter, but I do follow Jordan Scott, the guy who makes the Rooster Teeth Grim Eclipse game, and he retweeted it, and that's how I found out about it. And then Dylan Gu as well, I think liked it or retweeted it or some such other thing. Kathleen, who voiced Tex from Rooster Teeth, she came out and said it was true.
Which is
She
Monty's wife.
completely unreliable.
Okay, here's the thing.
It's a credible
I'm
source.
not saying she's
people-
alive, I'm just saying it was a lot of this stuff that kept mounting that kind of made people
No,
go
yeah,
like,
no,
whoa.
I understand.
Right,
I'm just
right.
explaining that, like, she
Let's look
is
at this
not a
too.
good source.
Kathleen
She is-
was also like all the people that came out against Rooster Teeth were also people who were let go, and that does mean
Not
that
Dylan.
they are
Okay,
not
actually.
like they It does mean that they're not under like an NDA, obviously, or they don't want to lose their jobs. I get why not everyone would say anything, but it is also like you have to realize these people came from a position where they were like Shane, where they felt like they were they were creative people who just kind of couldn't work in a team or couldn't do anything. Kathleen had noticeably some history of Barbara.
She has a history of starting things.
And also a history of starting things. She just started some drama in RTX 2014. JJ, who previously voiced Neptune and
Mercury.
Sorry, you're right, Mercury. He was fired from Rooster Teeth for unknown reason. He was also
According to JJ, he left.
Yeah. Both things. They wanted to change how Screenplay is the old movie podcast used to have. And they wanted to change some stuff because it wasn't getting as many views as they wanted to, and he pushed back on it or something. And both of these people, when they're the people that came out with actual statements. Dylan Gu and Jordan Scott just retweeted it. But
And from my knowledge, Dylan Gu is no longer, he was only contracted to work on Volume 3. Apparently it's not a lock whether he'll necessarily be part of Volume 4 or not. And Jordan Scott, that was the thing, and his retweet was removed, so he probably...
So was Dylan Gu's, actually.
He was probably a lot like me. He was probably like, I just saw this, and wow, this guy has credibility, but he's not part of the actual team.
Jordan Scott, everybody wrote heartfelt stuff, when Monty passed away of these posts. And Jordan Scott also did one, and I understood his pain and everything, but he also in it he kept referring to Monty as senpai. I was a little I don't know. I felt
it's an attitude people have towards Monty. Whether it's right or wrong, people really respected the guy.
No. I mean, it was a thing where he's I think that it comes from the same thing where he really idolized Monty, and just hearing this initially kind of shocked him into it. I would say that Rooster Teeth. I'm pretty sure a company-wide email was sent out to Rooster Teeth being don't talk about this.
Pretty much.
On the social media. Don't talk about this on the podcast. Don't say anything about this. It will blow over. It has blown over for the most part. I feel like most people have moved on.
For the
from
most
it.
part. The people who believe it are the people who believe it. The people that don't, and there you go.
Oh, but man.
Without corroborating statements, it's you'll never be able to have any concrete resolution on it. So that's kind of what I went through. As we spoke about it and discussed it, I was like, there are some parts of this that seem plausible to me. There are others that seem ridiculous to me. And there are others that, if true, are pretty inexcusable. If they are as they are presented. Problem being, I'm never gonna know which is which, so I have a decision here. Do I trust in Shane Newville, or do I trust in Rooster Teeth? And considering I know very little about Shane Newville as a person, and granted I don't know Rooster Teeth, any of the people that currently work there as people as well, I only know their how they project themselves, how other people perceive them. I know more about them than I do Shane Newville, so I personally
That was
find
another
it...
thing too. It's yeah.
Am I
followed those
going
people
to
for,
accept
8
that
years,
everybody at Rooster Teeth hates Monty, basically? I do not want to continue his legacy. No. I think somewhere along the line wires got crossed, probably crossed by Shane in a lot of instances, because of the stress and the grief of his own personal life weighed upon his judgment and clouded his mind, and prevented him from seeing the bigger picture, and I'm sure the same can also be said for some Rooster Teeth employees. It was a terrible time. Could some mistakes possibly have been made? Sure. Who am I to say? But I think this is not a black and white issue, and it cannot be approached from a black and white angle, which is what a lot of people have done. They're like, oh, Rooster Teeth,
Rooster
the
Teeth,
corporate
too
people,
corporate.
they're ruining art. They're not allowing art to be made. By
they're like, oh, Rooster Teeth is like, they've gotten too, they like to present themselves as being like friendly to people, but really all they do is care about money. And some people are like, well, they could have, it's like, no. So they could sacrifice some money to make sure all their employees feel better treated and stuff. And it was like, well, yeah. But I still think that, like, none of you know Shane Newell and how it was to work with him. And I don't know how it is to work with, the Ruby team either. But I do know, like, I do know. I have followed these people. I've followed, the Rooster Teeth people for a very long time. They're not just, like, normal celebrities where you see them in a movie or often. Like, I listen to the podcast very regularly. I'm a very regular listener to the podcast. And so I've heard them talk about, like, an hour and a half every week for the past, like, 5 years.
So you have a better insight into their lives.
Even though I don't know them personally, obviously enough, this is their online person that they're showing. But over 5 years, when you listen to someone, you have an idea of possibly who they are.
You can bet that they're not terrible people, and especially not towards Monty Ohm.
Especially not to Monty Ohm.
Yeah.
I saw the panel. I saw like all the posts they made. Everything. I saw how everyone was. It's like there's no way that everyone immediately was like, "Well, all right, Monty's dead. Time to make
right."
Ruby
See, that's a frustrating thing about this because it sort of paints everybody who I know for a fact cared about the guy, and it paints them as people who just did not care about him one bit, and they were willing to trample over his legacy just to like make a couple of bucks. That's what he tries to paint them as, and that's such a crappy way to do that, especially like because these are people that did care about the guy, and he's kind of. I hate the fact that he's using Monty's death as sort of the platform to kind of like mudsling.
Air his grievances. Yeah. To say like, well, this is why I was fired and I'm not like,
It's like he titles the letter, "Oh, this is for all those who treasured Monty Oom," and it's just like you're using Monty basically to throw shade at this company that you didn't like because you got fired, basically.
And it's also like, I would feel mad. I would feel infuriated. I was the people like, for instance, Carrie is directly mentioned. He's a director. And he's directly mentioned this letter.
I believe Gray Haddock mentioned.
Gray Haddock also. It's like these people just knew him. They were friends. And it's like, can you imagine like having someone accuse you of being like trying to trash your friend's legacy after he had died, which is like a thing that really impacted you and everything. And now you can't, not only are you accused by everything? Not only is the fandom accusing you of like ruining,
but you really can't come out and defend yourself because it would be unprofessional. Like the closest we've got to a statement, Matt did a vlog about like the Ruby team and like praising them, and he specifically said like the core team of like Miles, Carey, and somebody else. And like I felt like that may have been a jab subtly.
And
and then
was.
The other closest thing was Barbara posted something, I think, to her Snapchat the day of the letter.
She posted a Snapchat.
She was like, my day today, and it was a picture of her like she'd been crying
she was like,
all day.
She was exhausted. And she looked exhausted, like she'd been like, and it's like, of course,
it makes you think she is the community manager, so all this stuff is her responsibility.
Right, she had to read everything and report to it, and she had to get that email where it's like, don't talk about it. Don't do it. It's like, I feel like, regardless of what you think, if the letter's true, the letter's false, here's what you know. You know for a fact that Shane Newell is the kind of guy who will write a 37-page letter about a place he was just fired from. That's what know for a fact.
By the way, this guy is never going to get a job in the industry ever again.
I would never
This was such a stupid decision.
He's a ticking time bomb. He wrote this thing about how he has depression, how he is unable to work as a team player, how he's unable to change to a workflow, how he's
probably
able
broke
to,
an NDA and outed his last employer in front of an audience of millions. It's
like if you hire him and then you have to let him go, there's a chance that he will write a huge 37-page letter to incite your fan base against you. That's the kind of person that he is.
Yeah.
Now, is the letter true? Is the letter not? Obviously, you can read it and judge for yourselves. I think it's pretty self-evident that Shane Newell has some
issues,
serious problems.
And it calls I don't know the guy personally, but when you not only have those things going on with you, but that's how you open your letter, basically saying everything wrong with you, and then you proceed to go through the entire letter talking about things that there was no corroborating evidence for, and then getting upset with things that seem perfectly reasonable to those who don't have a personal stake in the situation. it casts doubt upon your credibility. So me
Monty's
personally, I do
has
not.
No evidence, by the way. Not a single bit of evidence in anything.
Yeah, I do not.
Monty's
All
family has
hearsay.
come out like kind of not to like it's they've actually handled the situation really well. Where like they come out, all the statements they've made are kind of like, well, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. You know, my brother was great. I appreciate you're able to keep up with him. He also really liked the community. He loved Rooster Teeth, and you should, you know, he's like, they're kind of like, they're not saying anything against Shane, but they're also saying like, hey, you guys should support Rooster Teeth. Almost like it's like, you know, from everything they've heard, there was, you know, there's nothing going on. Anyhow.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Let's go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah.
RTX 2016, the panel for Ruby. I feel so bad for whoever's on that panel.
Oh, they're gonna get asked so many.
They're gonna get
annoying
asked.
questions.
They
So
will
many
carry
questions.
through as they always have, and I do have faith that it'll all be okay. Because
It's gonna be a
despite,
cringe fest,
yeah, I'm sure
I'm
there are
telling
grains of truth in it all, but here's the fact of the matter, the last thing I'll say, is that Ruby is Monty Ohm's legacy, basically. That show is his own creation. It is still ongoing. It's more popular now than it's ever been. I personally think it is better than it has ever been, currently. The future of that show is where his mark will be left, truly, upon the world. The success of that show. So, the fans of the show have a decision to make. Do they turn their back on it, or do they continue to support it and support Rooster Teeth, and by extension honor Monty Ohm? That is the decision you have to personally make. And as far as I am concerned, I will be continuing to follow the show, even knowing that, yes, I do believe the letter does have some grains of truth sprinkle in, because I think that's what Monty would want. He would want the show to succeed. He would not want the community to turn against the creators. So,
Right.
that's all I'll say.
I wish he was still alive to comment, and I wish he was alive to continue to work on the show.
But he is not.
Unfortunately, that is
life.
the real reality of the situation we're in, where we live in a world without Monty Ohm anymore. And so Meso's right. That's his legacy. You know, consider what you want to do with it. But
Very somber.
there you go.
But there's a time and a place for jokes. This is really it.
Yep.
So, let's go ahead and wrap up.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to this TTV episode, TTV Talks episode. Tune in next week for us, and you can also catch us on Vessel at vessel.com/TTV channel. I'm Kahi.
I'm Meso.
I'm Barterin.
Meso, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're
sorry.
I'm sorry. And this has been TTV Talks.
Farewell, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.